Good evening, everyone. We are now in Second Kings chapter 1. Given what we have reviewed yesterday, I want to draw your attention to the fact that God had forgiven King Achav and would not destroy him, but would bring evil in the days of his son. That was what we read in chapter 21. We come today in Second Kings chapter 1, and we are now dealing with his son Ahaziah, or here in the English, Ahaziah. And it begins this way in 1 verse 1. Moab rebelled with Israel, broke ranks with Israel after the death of Ahav. And we are told in verse 2 something happened, and Ahaziah fell through, uh, I guess you can call it a skylight in the upper chamber, or in some cases, some had suggested that he fell down the stairs. But he had a bad fall from the upper to the lower when he was in Samaria, and that is where the palace is. And he became ill, and this was the word that I had highlighted. It is not became ill, but in great pain. That would be a better word. And so he sent messengers and said to them, now messengers again represents him to do some work. It is also used in translation for the word angels, but in this case, it will be messengers on behalf of Ahaziah. And he said to them, go inquire of Baal Zevuf, the god of Ekron, whether I will recover from this sickness. Again, this is not sickness, it will be this great pain. Now, it appears that this great pain is leading him to think that he is about to die. It is not something that he is used to. Now, we need to think a little bit about the ancient people. When certain things happen, the ancient Israelites have a book of healing, a book of healing where wise people would know what to do and how to great medicine from the herbs and the flora and fauna around them. But it is in this case that he may have fallen in such a way where there was no idea that he is going to recover. Now, this word recover means to be alive. Now, I know that in the English, recover means that you would improve on your situation. But this really doesn't mean recover. It gives us a picture. He is wondering whether he would still live after this fall. He is about to die. He is in great pain, and there's nothing the doctors can do for him. We come to verse 3. Verse 3 tells us and brings us back to Elijah. In verse 3, it says, there is no but here, the angel of the Lord, and this will be the Malach. Malach is angel or messenger. Same word, right? Same word. Messenger, angel, same word. Of Jehovah. And that means he's a messenger of Jehovah to speak to Elijah. And this would be Elijah the Tishbite. And this is what the angel says now. When it says the angel of Malach Jehovah, it really means that this Malach or this angel represents Jehovah. It says, arise, go meet the Malach of the king of Samaria. Interestingly, you find that uh, the king of Samaria is considered a smaller entity than the king of Israel. And this would lead some of the Jewish commentators to think that he is undeserving of Israel. And so he is mentioned as a smaller entity of Samaria. That would be how some of the Jewish people would think. And then say to them, is there no God in Israel? Now, when he says no God, this word God means Elohim. Is there no Elohim in Israel that you are going to inquire of Baal Zevuf, the Elohim of Ekron? Now, this word God is also Elohim. So he is asking them, go and speak to the Elohim of Ekron. Now, Ekron is a place in the Philistines area, right, of the Philistines. And notice this would be in the south or the southwest, which is way down below the kingdom of Israel into the kingdom of Judah. And so, what is interesting or strange, you may say, is that he would have sent messengers, and you can think of it this way. This is Israel, this is Judah, and here would be Ekron. And the idea is from Israel to go all the way down to Ekron to inquire. Now, the word inquire is to go seek an answer. Now, herein lies the challenge. Oftentimes, you would find that in the Torah, God warns them, do not deal with spiritists, do not deal with necromancy. They're dealing with the people of the dead. Do not deal with spiritism. Do not deal with the calling up of spirits and the like. Not that they are real, but there is a certain spiritual realm force that is in play, and it is in existence that certain human beings would have learned how to harness some of these supernatural abilities. And God warns the Israelites not to dabble, not to entertain, and there is a reason. One is human beings are very curious creatures. And there is a tendency when certain magic is done that they will gravitate and prefer to see some of these things with their eyes rather than to trust God that he has done great things in the past. These are all tests of their confidence in God. And they have been warned that if they do that, they will turn their heads away from God and follow after all these strange practices, as well as to other gods. Now, the god of Ekron here is Baal Zevuf, and this is actually a fly god. So the image is a picture of a fly. And Ahaziah, thinking that he is going to die, is seeking an answer whether the god of Ekron, the Elohim of Ekron, would tell him the secret of his existence of life. Now, the question here in verse 3 is this: why would Ahaziah go and send messengers, the Malach, to Ekron to inquire of Baal Zevuf? And the question is it because there is no Elohim in Israel? And they are to remember Jehovah is the Elohim of Israel. Exodus chapter 20, where we read the Ten Commandments, you shall have no other Elohim before me. I am the Elohim, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. See, all of these are phrased within the 10 statements or the 10 commandments, as we call it, to constantly remind the Israelites, both the northern and the southern, that they are not to have any other Elohim before Jehovah, the one who brought them out of Egypt. Now, God never brings them out of Egypt every day or every now and then. There's only one time, and they are to remember that. And the Torah was given to them to comply so that their culture, their behavior, their practices is that they shall have no other Elohim. So, what is this about Ahaziah going to send people to inquire of the Elohim of Ekron, Baal Zevuf? And now Elijah is brought into play. I just want to draw your attention to the end of chapter 21, where God says that he will bring evil only in the days of the son of Achav, because he had humbled himself. So the sons of Achav will see God bringing evil and harm to them. And this is the case in Ahaziah or Ahaziah. You find that he is inclined to follow the footsteps of his parents being King Ahav and his mother Jezebel. Jezebel is a Sidonian, and together they serve the gods of the Amorites, the Ashtaroth, as well as the Baalim. Now, in this case, Ahaziah has gone one step further and has not inquired of them within Israel. He has sent people to go down to Ekron to search for answers from Baal Zevuf. It appears that people in those days, they seem to know which group of people have what Elohim. And the Elohim of Israel and Judah would be Jehovah, and that would be well known to all the other nations around them. And for Ahaziah or Hadziah to go and inquire from the God of Ekron is, in a clear sense, a sense of rebellion. This is a rebellion against God, right? Against Jehovah. Now, please bear in mind the word rebellion means a rejection of authority. And so Ahaziah has surrendered the authority of Jehovah and has sought the authority of Baal Zevuf. And in such cases, you find that they will have to be responsible for whatever they do. See, God is not bringing harm upon the son of Ahav because of what Ahav has done, but in the course of bringing up his children, he has led them to learn about other Elohim of other lands, of the Sidonians, of the Philistines, of Baal, Ashtaroth, and the Amorites. And hence, in this chapter, I want you all to see that God is going to hold Ahaziah or Ahaziah in the English personally responsible, not because of what his father or mother did, although that would have an influence and impact on his upbringing, but he himself, as king, has asked to seek answers from another God and not the Elohim in Israel. Verse 4. Verse 4 begins this way. Therefore, this is what Jehovah says. The angel of Jehovah, or Malach Jehovah, is instructing Elijah to go and engage with the messengers. You will not get down from bed from which you have lain, but you shall certainly die. Now, this is the message that's going to be told to Ahaziah, because he wanted an answer whether he will live as a result of that strange and great fall from the upper chambers to the ground. And so, after hearing this, Elijah departed. So, and then Elijah walked away. Verse 5, when the messengers returned to Ahaziah, he said to them, why have you come back? Why did you return? Now, remember, this word return comes from the Hebrew word shuv. It is to turn back or turn away. So, in this context, why have you turned back and returned to the original place, which is at the palace of Ahaziah? So, messengers received this information, and verse 6 is the reply. It says, the messengers, said to him, you know what? Someone came up to meet us and said to us, go walk. That would mean walk. And return means shuv to the king who sent you and say this to him. It says, this is what Jehovah says. Is it because there is no Elohim in Israel that you are sending messengers to inquire of Baal Zevuv, the god of Ekron? The implication of this is there no Elohim in Israel that you need to go to Elohim in Ekron, which is away from Israel, really away. And that seems to suggest that you should have gone to inquire of the Elohim in Israel. And because of that, as a conclusion, you see here, therefore. Now, this word here is because of this. This is what it means. Because of this, you will not get down from bed upon which you have lain, but you shall certainly die. Now, this word certainly die is mot tamut. Now, the idea here of mot tamut comes from the same expression when God warned the man when in the garden, saying that you shall not eat from the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. The day you eat of it, you will certainly die. And so, you shall certainly die is exactly that same phrase. Now, what does that mean? You shall certainly die means this: it is definite. You will come to an end. See, die literally means the existence that you now know will come to an end. The Hebrew expressions are very action oriented. So, die is not a concept, die is an action. The action literally says that the life that you now are having will come to an end and it will stop. And this should give us a better picture of the state of the fall that Ahaziah had when he fell from the upper chambers down to below. It is so serious that He is laying in bed. He cannot get down from bed, and looks like he had hurt his spine. And God says, "You will certainly die," meaning he will not live, because he was inquiring, will he live or not? And without having to go down to Ekron, the messengers have brought back the message, and this message is from God. Now think of it this way: these are all prophetic because it hasn't happened yet, and the word of God will come true because the Elohim in Israel spoke through Elijah. And this is a message that's given back to Ahaziah. Verse 7. Verse 7 says, "And then he, Ahaziah, said to them, 'What did the man look like?'" Now, interesting, this is the English expression, I would say. Um, the idea that is being expressed here in verse 7 uh, literally says, how what is the justice of man, right? What did the man look like? What did the man appear like? uh what is the manner of this man? What is the justice of this man? uh and the idea of justice here, I guess you can say, uh it is about his clothing, his demeanor, uh the a description of this person. That is what this phrase is talking about. How is he like? What is he dressed? Who came up to meet you and said these words to you? And then they replied. Now, I think it's important for us to realize that these words are in sequence. Verse 8 is, "And then they said to him," it says, "He was a hairy man with a leather belt around his waist." And somehow he knows, and he said, "He is Elijah the Tishbite." So, how would he know? We are not told that Ahaziah had ever met with Elijah, but we have read regarding Ahav having met Elijah. And perhaps in all these engagements, even without us being told, it seems that he, Ahaziah, actually either know him from the description of Ahav, the father, or that as he was growing up in the palace, he would have seen uh, Elijah before. But we are not told. So that would have been a speculation. So I urge you to be aware that as we read through the historical narrative, we get the sense of Ahaziah somehow knowing how Elijah looked like. And so in this case, he then sent. And then, verse 9, the king sent him a captain of 50 with his 50 men. He went up to him, and behold, he was sitting on top of a hill. And he said to him, now understand all this, he sent him a captain, and he went up to him, and he said to him, all this would refer to the captain. The second he sent to him would be Elijah. And this is what they said, "You man of God." The king says, "Come down," means descend. The idea here is we need to understand that this word here says, I think we would be better for us to use it as a formal declaration because it is the king who is speaking. Well, in our language, or in Eastern language, you find that when the king speaks, there is a tendency for languages to use a slightly different word to represent his speech. That his speech is authoritative. Just like when God speaks, the the Hebrew word is the same. It is a formal word to represent that it is a serious speech. It is a formal speech. And so we would use in English this word called declaration, to declare rather than to say. So I wouldn't use the word say, but it would be the king declared, made a formal declaration, basically saying the king has told you to do this. Verse 10. And then Elijah replied to the captain of 50, says, "If I am a man of God, may fire come down from the sky and eat you and your 50." Now, these words are very important because we're talking about fire coming down from the skies. It is not heaven as the abode, but, and then this word consume means eat. Fire is seen to burn away, right? To burn away anything in its path. And this is equated to eating. In human terms, when you eat something, you put something into your mouth, you chew, and then you swallow, and that disappears. And so when a fire comes and burns something, and then whatever it was burning is gone, then it is called eating. It's exactly the same. It's a very imagery word. So to consume, to eat you, and that's why fire is always spoken of as a consuming fire, a fire that eats. And so we're told Jehovah is a consuming fire, because in the case of Nadav and Avihu, where the two sons of Aaron offered strange fire in the tabernacle, in the sanctuary, God sent fire from heaven and destroyed them. So, in the same way where Elijah called fire from heaven and burned up the offering that was soaked in water on Mount Carmel, he is now suggesting the same, that this fire would come down, and then fire came down from the sky and consumed him and his 50 men. Why was this a problem? Because they are carrying out the instruction of the king, because it's a declaration. Now, in the old days, when the king says so, it must be so. However, we are here to see that when it is not to be done, that people are responsible for themselves and they cannot pass the onus to the king. Read this in verse 11. It says, "And then the king sent him another captain of 50 with his 50 men, and he said to him," so please be aware, captain of 50 men is the one speaking. Elijah would be this him. And this is what they said: "You man of God, this is what the king says. Come down quickly." Now, the translation is, well, I guess, very pleasant, very sweet. This what says again, uh, is in a more formal sense. You can say that this phrase, this is what the king says, is thus said the king. Again, very formal, as if it was a declaration. It's like, thus said the Lord. This is what the king said. It is a formal declaration. Come down quickly in haste. And this is to tell Elijah, the king is more important. That you is just a citizen, a subject of the king. The king has made his speech, and thus you must come. Now, again, we find verse 12. Verse 12 tells us, and then Elijah replied to them. It says, if I am a man of God, may fire come down from heaven and eat you and your 50. And then the fire of God came down from heaven and consumed him and his 50. So we can think of it this way. In the first instance, when we read, fire came down from the sky, the fire of God came down from the sky. So the fire is from God who came down from the skies. And this gives us a very important picture. The fire is sent by God, not sent by Elijah. And so it is not an Elijah type of miracle. Elijah was just there as a subject of this engagement. So God showed power, and it's to demonstrate that God is behind Elijah. Verse 13. Verse 13 says, and then the king sent the captain of a third 50 with his 50 men. When the third captain of the 50 went up, something happened. He, the captain, came and bowed down on his knees before Elijah, begged him, and said to him. Now, notice the difference. This word here, bow down on his knees, is to kara, it is to stoop down, it is one word, it is to demonstrate humility. When it's to demonstrate humility, then you find that God is really looking at people who are humble. The second part here is beg him. Now, this word is not really beg, but is to ask for favor. Right? Ask for favor. It is important for us to realize that asking for favor is not an instruction to Elijah. All right? And said to him is a human speech. So I hope that you can see that all of this is a demonstration that this third captain is not carrying out the instruction of the king. He is not bringing with himself the authority of the king, but he is now taking action that he is not wanting to die, recognizing that Elijah is a man of God. And he says these words, you man of God. It is no longer if, you are man of God. Please let my life and the lives of these 50 servants of yours, and this is now an assignment, is no longer the king, but of yours, be precious in your sight. Now, the idea of precious in your sight is a very interesting expression. Be precious means to be prized, to be valuable, right? Be precious is prized, valuable. Don't treat these lives as a waste. And he continues to say, he says, behold, fire came down from heaven and ate the first two captains of 50 with their 50s. But now let my life be valuable in your sight. Now think, all of these in your sight means in your eyes. Precious is in the eyes of the beholder. Now, in the English language, we also have this expression, beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. In the Oriental or Eastern view of things, many things comes from the eyes of the beholder, like good and evil, like precious value is in the eyes of the beholder. Grace and favor comes from the eyes of the beholder. So that we understand that this is how they speak and this is how it is valued. In verse 15, and then the decision comes from God. The Malach Jehovah said to Elijah, given this situation, go down with him. Do not be afraid of him. The idea here is do not be fearful to his face. And so we find Elijah got up, went down with him to see the king. In the first two instances, because the two captains of 50 came very pompous, demanding this and that, saying that this is what the king wants to do and wants you to do. The king has already rebelled against God. So the man of God stood his ground, ignoring the authority of the king. In verse 13, the third captain of the 50 demonstrated humility and understanding, and thereby his life was spared. So each is responsible for themselves. Verse 16, and then he said to him, and that would be Elijah, and this is spoken to the king. This is what Jehovah says. Since you have sent Malach to inquire of Baal Zevuf, the Elohim of Ekron, is it because there is no Elohim in Israel to seek answers of his word? There is no confidence that you have demonstrated on the God of Israel, Jehovah. And as a result, therefore, for this reason, you will not get down from the bed upon which you have lain, but you will certainly die. The life that you know will come to an end. Now, in verse 17, we read this. Verse 17 begins with, well, this word so is, and then. We don't know how long between 16 and 17. But we do know that 17 will come after 16 is over. So we can say that there is a period of time that after Elijah had spoken and repeated the words that you will not get down from bed upon which you have lain, but you will certainly die. That dying you will die, and you will come to a point of termination. And the description goes this way: Ahaz, yeah, died. It's the same word here. In accordance with the word of Jehovah, which Elijah had spoken. This tells us that sometime after it is spoken, um, we know that Ahaziah, the king, did not die instantly. This is what is important. Not instantly. The word does not mean an instant death. Just as in Genesis chapter 2 and 3, when the man and the woman ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they did not instantly die, but he did die, and they did die. And then we're told, and since he had no son, Jehoram became king in his place in the second year of Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. This one requires us to understand a little bit. We have two timelines that we need to worry about: Israel and Judah. And in the second year of Jehoram, we see this. This is Jehoram. And in the second year, you find that this will be Jehoram here. One of the things that you find is that the Bible keeps repeating names. Then sometimes we get confused. So we have two Jehorams here. Jehoram from the south, the son of Jehoshaphat. And then we have Jehoram in the north. This is also the son of Achav. Now, what does that mean? It means this: Achav had one son, Ahaziah, and the other son is Jehoram. And he took place or ascended to the throne in the second year of Jehoram from the south. And that's what verse 17 is talking about. So we have a better picture of the north and south. And then it concludes this way. And for the remainder of the acts of Ahaziah, which he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? Now, this one, I just need to make mention, this is lost. This is not First and Second Chronicles. This is not First and Second Kings. It is really called the Book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel. And we don't have it anymore. Perhaps some of it is written down in First and Second Kings and First and Second Chronicles, but the entirety is lost. And there are a number of books which we don't have today. And perhaps they may have it at that time, even at the time when they were writing the book of First and Second Chronicles at the time of the post-exile period. Now, as a conclusion, when we come to the end of this chapter, I hope that you can see Ahaziah had harm brought to him, not because of the acts of the father, Ahav, but it's his own acts in rebellion against God, to reject the authority and the word of God, to go and look for the God of Ekron instead. And God held him accountable because he had seen what God had done. And in so doing, we can now tell that even the soldiers, the army, the captain of the 50, the first two died because they refused to let go of the words of the king. At the end of the day, each of them are responsible for their own acts. The third captain of the 50, he didn't die because he humbled himself before the man of God, that he recognized that Elijah is certainly the man of God, so don't fight him. Don't tell him what to do. So the only one to tell Elijah what to do is God. And God spoke through the Malach Jehovah. And so what does chapter 1 tell us is the greatest is God, the God in Israel. And he speaks through the Malach to Elijah. And so the Malach of the king never stood a chance. And so it's only God telling Elijah what to do and nothing else. Now, at this point in time, please remember Elijah is already quite old. And he is not worried of whether he would die or not because he's coming to that point. but he wants to make sure that he's doing the right thing, and the right thing would be what God tells him to do. And you notice Elijah is willing to sit and wait for the instructions from God and then carry it out in the face of the king, Ahaziah, by bearing him bad news. This is one of the most difficult moments in the life of any prophet, to bring bad news to the most powerful man in the land. And Elijah was fearless because he had seen God work through him in Mount Carmel. uh, and here, seeing how fire came down from the skies, Elijah is fearless, and the king stood no chance. And with this, we come to the end of chapter 1.